Okay, today we are going to practice more with the properties that we learned yesterday. It says simplify the expression. This time we're going to have numbers and variables together. So when you see a number raised to an exponent, we are going to take the step and evaluate that. And if we need to talk about how to evaluate those, we can. Before we start, I should probably teach you about a fun little trick. Are you familiar with the term PEMDAS?
Yes.
Okay, if you write PEMDAS with 2 letters per line, this is a way to remember some of the simpler properties of exponents. When you see parentheses, you multiply the exponents. When you see multiplication, you add the exponents. When you see division, you subtract the exponents. So whichever thing that you see, you do whatever is below that on this little helper guide. The E doesn't really do anything. Sometimes I write exponents next to that. But some of you that maybe struggle to remember the properties of exponents, that might be helpful. So looking at number 1, it's multiplication. So what are we going to do with the exponents? Add them. So we have to add -2, -4, and 3. That would give us z to the -3rd. You are not to leave your answers with negative exponents. You have to deal with the negative exponents. So this becomes 1 over z to the 3rd. Number 2, we did one kind of like this yesterday. I would always attack the parentheses first. So we've got the y, z to the -2. Now let's attack these parentheses. X squared raised to the 3rd would be x to the 6th. Y raised to the 3rd, so y to the 3rd. And then there's a z at the end. If possible, you always want to write these as numbers first, then letters in alphabetical order. So we want to start with the x's. If we start with the x's, we've got x to the 6th. Are there any other x's in there? Nope, so we got x to the 6th. Then we've got a y here and y to the 3rd. So what's that going to be? Y to the 4th. And then we've got z to the -2 and another z. Z to the -1st. The important thing here is that negative exponents move. Only the thing with the negative exponent is going to move. So x to the 6th and y to the 4th are going to stay on the top. Z to the 1st goes on the bottom. And you don't really need to write the exponent of 1, but I certainly won't count it wrong if you put an exponent of 1 on the z. Okay. Number 3. What do you think we need to do on number 3? To distribute, like quote unquote distribute. We need to apply the exponent of -2 to everything inside. Now here's something important to note. That 4x squared is not 4x squared. It is 4 times x squared. So the 4 needs to be raised to the -2. And then x would be x to the -4th, y to the +6th. So the numbers, the coefficients are not attached to those letters. They are actually a term, a factor all on their own. Okay. The 4 to the -2, that needs to go to the bottom. And the x to the -4, that needs to go to the bottom and become x to the 4th. Y to the 6th gets to stay on the top. Oh, but we're not done yet. Now we can actually evaluate. What is 4 squared? 16. So our final answer is y to the 6th over 16x to the 4th. Okay, number 14. The best way to look at this is to split it up vertically. You've got 18 over 24. x to the fourth over x to the negative fourth, y to the sixth over y to the third, and z to the third over z to the third. If you split this up vertically, you need to look at each piece vertically, kind of individually. Oopsie. So 18 over 24, those are not exponents. That's the fraction 18/24. How can we simplify the fraction 18/24? 3/4. If you don't know how to do that, you can either punch in 18 ABC 24 and then let your calculator simplify it, or if you know how to simplify fractions on the graphing calculator, or 18 and 24 both have 6 in common. 18 divided by 6 is 3. 24 divided by 6 is 4. Okay, x to the fourth divided by x to the negative fourth. If we're dividing, we subtract our exponents. What is 4 minus a negative 4? 8. So we have x to the 8th. Another way to think of this is x to the negative 4th, that needs to move to the top, and it'd be x to the 4th on the top, so then 4 and 4 would make 8 of those x's on the top. Y to the 6th divided by y to the 3rd. What is 6 minus 3? 3. And then what about those z's? Z to the 0, which would just be a 1. So we don't really need anything. Our answer is 3x to the 8th, y to the 3rd over 4. Number 5 is really similar to number 4. It just takes a little bit of work to get there. So let's start this together. This would be x to the 4th, because negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. Y to the negative 12th, because 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. On the bottom, we have x to the 9th and y to the 15th. Now you can break this up vertically. And there are 2 ways to do this. There's probably like 4 or 5 different ways you could do this. If you want to do the subtraction, which is the most common way of doing this, x to the 4th divided by x to the 9th. You need to subtract 4 minus 9. What is 4 minus 9? Negative 5. Negative 12 minus 15 is negative 27. So our final answer would be x to the 5th and y to the 27th on the bottom. We can't have the top have nothing, so what do we put on the top? A 1. Another way to do this is to realize that this y to the negative 12th needs to move to the bottom. So you'd have x to the 4th over x to the 9th, y to the 12th, y to the 15th. Those would combine to get you the y to the 27th on the bottom. These 4 x's would cancel out 4 of the 9, leaving you with 5 left over on the bottom. So there's a couple different ways that you can think about that as you're simplifying. Okay, number 6, we're going to kind of rearrange it together, and then I'll have you finish it on your own. Numbers first, so we've got 20, x to the 14th, y to the 10th, that's the top. Because we're multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So we're just combining things on the top, combining things on the bottom. On the bottom, say there was another number in front of this xy to the 9th. You'd have to multiply that 2 to that other number. There isn't another number, so it's just 2. But we do have x to the 3rd and another x. So that means we have x to the 4th on the bottom. And y to the what on the bottom? 15th, because 6 plus 9 is 15. Now I want you to try to finish simplifying this on your own. (20 divided by 2 gives us 10. you can do these x and y using the subtraction rule. 14 minus 4 is 10, so we have x to the 10th. And then 10 minus 15 is negative 5, so we have y to the negative 5th, which would then move to the bottom and be y to the 5th on the bottom. The other way of thinking about it, these 4 x's will cancel out 4 of the 14, leaving 10 left over. The 10 y's on top will cancel out 10 of the 15, leaving 5 left over. Some of you do better thinking about which one is bigger. That's where there's going to be some left over, how many are left over, rather than dealing with subtraction and negative exponents. Either way, you should get 10x to the 10th over y to the 5th. All right, number 7. We definitely have some work to do on number 7. Let's start with rewriting the first part. Okay, we need to deal with that exponent of negative 2. And again, this 2 is 2 times x to the 3rd, not 2x to the 3rd. So the 2 has to get an exponent of negative 2. This x, 3 times negative 2, is negative 6. Y to the negative 2 times negative 2 would be y to the 4th. On the bottom, 3 to the negative 2, x to the positive 2, y to the negative 6. From this point onward, there are several different ways that you could go about getting the correct answer. And one way is not more right than the other. If you understand the properties of the exponents and the steps that you use to get from here to the answer, and you have the correct simplified answer, it's just as correct as however your neighbor did the problem, even if they took a totally different route. So I would really like to combine things, but the problem I have is that I can't combine the numbers because that's 2 to the negative 2. What needs to happen with that 2 to the negative 2? It needs to go to the bottom. So I've got 3 and 8. This needs to become 2 squared on the bottom, and this 3 to the negative 2 needs to become 3 squared on the top. So let me highlight. This moved here, and this thing moved here. Now I'm going to combine my x's. We've got x to the negative 5th, x to the negative 6th. Negative 5 plus negative 6 is negative 11. We've got y to the 5th and y to the 4th. That combines to give us y to the 9th. Do the same thing on the bottom. Combine your x's. X squared and x squared is x to the 4th. Y to the negative 2, y to the negative 6, y to the negative 8. Okay, so I know this is 3 times 9. Actually, I'm just going to write the 9 right up here. This thing equals 9. What is 3 times 9? 27. And 2 squared is 4. This thing equals 4. 8 times 4 is 32. Okay, we're dividing, so we subtract. What is negative 11 minus 4? Negative 15. And we are dividing, so we subtract. 9 minus a negative 8 is positive 17. What's the last thing we need to do? Get that negative x to the x to the negative 15th to the bottom. So we'll have 27 y to the 17th over 32 x to the 15th.
We should probably check to see if we could simplify the fraction 20